Heath. I'm sorry for the delay in getting this to all of you. I am deep down that YouTube rabbit hole now. I would not be surprised if I became, what do they call them, an influencer. I think I found my calling. Anyway, I hope each of you is doing well and staying safe. That is what is most important. The educational aspect of this, um, I and the other faculty, we can absolutely help you out, but it really is important that you guys stay well and you're spending this time with your loved ones, those who are important to you, staying connected and things like that. Definitely reach out and let us know if there's anything that we can do for you. I am almost done making adjustments for the rest of the semester. Obviously, due dates and things are going to change. Email me with questions and concerns. This is a stressful time, and so I don't want to add any more stress to anybody. So let me know if there's something that you need help with, and I'll keep you posted on the syllabus and the changes, and I hope to have those out relatively quickly. I apologize for this presentation since it'll just be me essentially narrating my PowerPoint, but I'm hoping to have something better. That way, at least it's as close to being in class as possible. And I know that seems like a tall order, but I want to make sure y'all get the best teaching that I can do possible. So we spent a lot of time on crisis in the past. I wish that we could keep going deeper with that, and hopefully, I or even some of y'all come up with some ideas on how to address that. And if you do have questions or concerns, let me know, and I can address them as we move forward in different videos and things like that. I'm gonna pivot a little bit into talking about grief right now. Grief is sadly a very common aspect. You will have people that come to counseling to manage their grief or to work through whatever they might be feeling or thinking after the loss of someone. And not just always someone, it can also be the major loss of an idea, the loss of a relationship. These stages, try to conceptualize them to any time there's a loss, right? The most notable one, of course, is death. But it could be the loss of a dream, the loss of a goal, a relationship, a pet, things like that. So let me go ahead and, oh, okay, there we go. Um, I updated my PowerPoint and now it says that it has like design ideas. And when it was a thumbnail, this one looked pretty cool. When I finished it, I wanted to change it and I couldn't change this one slide, but the rest of it looks okay. So, what is grief? Grief is the process of reacting to some kind of loss, right? And process is a big word, it's a big umbrella word. It encompasses your thoughts, your feelings, your behaviors, your relationships. And like I said before, typically when we say loss or grief, a lot of people go to a place of death. Someone passed away. And it doesn't need to be limited to that. Take long term relationships, it ends for whatever reason. Um, a person might grieve that loss. It was the idea that we were going to stay together forever for the rest of our life. We were going to have children, and it didn't work out. I'm grieving that loss, right? Um, Very common. This is one of those things that, although it looks different in different cultures, it's experienced in every culture, right? Um, it can be seen as interfering with life, like it's a bad thing, right? And that's where that notion of I need to get over it, I need to get past it comes from. But it's a natural part of life, right? We're not always going to get the things that we want. And sometimes those things that we want, or the people that we love or that we're interested in, they're really, really important to us, and it doesn't happen, or they pass away, or something happens, and it's really difficult. It is normal, though. Grief gets lumped into diagnoses, unfortunately, right? Because think about if you're grieving, you're probably having difficulty sleeping, getting out of bed, difficulty eating, lots of crying, worry, things like that. And so it gets mislabeled as depression. And yeah, grief over an extended period of time can be problematic, or depression can occur after the loss of someone. We don't ever want to take somebody's grief and label it as a diagnosis. So, a couple key terms, just something to file away. Bereavement is suffering the loss of someone, the experience. Grief is your personal thoughts and feelings, the internal reaction that you individually feel. In mourning, right, when we say someone's in mourning, it's the expression of that grief, right? It's the, for lack of a better word, I'll say practice, however it looks, right? And that's where we see the cultural influences. So we're going to spend most of the time here today on the Kubler-Ross model, which, for those of you that aren't familiar with the name Kubler-Ross, you are certainly familiar with the 5 stages of grief, and that's what it is. Kubler-Ross was the person that came up with this model, and she spent quite a bit of time studying the experiences of people who were dying. And at the time, so during the 60s, new counselors or graduate students in counseling or psychology, the mental health field, the biggest problem that humanity faced was death, in their opinion. So that's why there was this emphasis on studying death. She interviewed a lot of terminally ill individuals and tried to lump together the different themes she found, and what she found were those 5 stages of grief. And her big work was on death and dying, and that's where this model comes from. So if this is your first time hearing about the stages of grief, here they are. If you need a refresher, here's what they look like. And her model has them go in this order, and we'll talk about do they need to go into this order. But the stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally acceptance. And these are, as we go through them, I would just kind of make mental notes of these different things, try and commit them to memory as best you can. I suspect that these would be on the NCE. Questions like, here's so-and-so, and they keep saying, oh no, my partner's not that sick, they're gonna make it, they're gonna pull through. This would be represented as which of the stages of grief, and then they'll give you multiple choice answers with these. I would hope everybody would pick denial. So denial: I'm fine, this isn't happening to me, it's not that bad, they're gonna pull through. The denial phase is relatively short-lived, right? Because you're faced with this. And so specifically in terms of death and dying, if someone's really severely ill or wounded and the life expectancy is very short, they're kind of jettisoned out of this stage fairly quickly. But really what it is an attempt to escape those feelings. We don't like negative feelings. Nobody likes negative affect and things like that, or negative mood. And sometimes we get really overwhelmed. And so denial is about trying to get away from it. If I can take away this problem or get the problem away from me, then these feelings won't be there. Another important thing to understand about a lot of these reactions is that they are normal, right? It's not abnormal to be in denial or to bargain or to be angry or any of them. But there's healthy and unhealthy versions of these stages. So healthy response, for lack of a better term, would be, there's a lot of crying. We would expect there to be negative mood and negative affect. Verbal denial, like this can't be happening. This can't be real. That's one thing to kind of say that, and the way we would probably take that is this person just is in shock, they can't believe it, versus trying desperately to convince themselves that this really is not happening. An unhealthy way is just the absence of reaction, right? Like literally moving on as though this is not happening, right? So if someone were terminally ill, being in denial would be they should be at home resting, kind of getting their affairs in order. And I'm sorry, I know this is a very morbid topic, trying to get these things in order or spending time with their loved ones, or maybe it's someone's partner's terminally ill or mortally wounded or something like that. But they're out and about doing non-necessary things, right? So they're in denial. They're not really understanding, accepting, appreciating the seriousness of the situation. Anger, right? So when we say anger, a lot of people think like fury, rage, that very stereotypical childlike anger of I'm so mad, right? For all of these, cast broad strokes, right? They look very different. Um, it doesn't have to be that. I don't want to make light of it, but like that grouchy, I'm gonna purse my lips and fold my arms. It can also be like, why me? It's frustration. It's maybe even some aggressive confusion, and someone saying maybe like, of course this would happen to me. Of course that's my luck. Why wouldn't this happen? Um, there's feelings of this isn't fair, right? Um, I worked with someone who had a lung cancer diagnosis, and he was very much in this phase. If we have to put him somewhere, and he was saying to me, the most ironic thing is I've never smoked a day in my life, and this is what I get, right? And everybody was concerned about, he had some other health conditions. Everybody was focused on that, like his cholesterol, his weight, things like that. Um, but then he got this thing, and it was such a curveball to him, and he was just really angry about it. How could this happen to me? What did I do? Healthy expression of anger, verbal things, like it's not wrong to say, it's not wrong to be angry, right? What we worry about is if that person's anger is showing up as self-destructive behavior, right? So they're angry, they're picking fights, they're pushing people away, they are lashing out at people, a lot of guilt or ruminating, right? They're just kind of sitting and stewing in it. Anger in itself is not bad, and it's not wrong. It can, be um, it can be frustrating for that individual, but anger happens, and in grief and loss, anger also happens. Um, we don't want that anger to be a problem, though. And so, what are healthy ways of expressing it and managing it? Bargaining. So, I think people kind of struggle with this in the sense of, well, what are they bargaining? They're saying, well, if I do this, then that. The bargaining phase for people, especially for matters that are beyond their control, such as with illness and death and dying, bargaining sounds like, if I could just have one more day with my parent, if I just make it to if I just make it to the end of the year, if I just do this, all I need is that, right? That's examples of bargaining. And really what it is, it's that person is trying to relay, I hope that things can change, right? What's difficult for us is they come to session, and you will hear this, I promise you. The person will say, I just need to make it to the summer. If I can just get this done, if I can just get wherever, then, and typically the sentence will kind of peter out, is we don't ever want to offer false hope and say, well, you could, it might happen, you don't know. That's where some hard work from us comes in, right? Where we need to, um, we don't want to feed false hope. At the same time, it's not wrong to, you know, join them in that thought, right? It's a balancing act. It's very difficult. Healthy is they're bargaining for treatment. This is where we start seeing terminal individuals say things like, "I don't want to, I don't want to be in a position where I can't feed myself, shower, change, and things like that. Or I don't want to go through another round of this particular treatment. It was too difficult." They're trying to compromise, maybe. They're looking at quality of life, and it's never wrong to express your wishes, right? I hope I get to make it to next year's ceremony. Unhealthy is when that person's really trying to bargain for unrealistic events or very distant. And if I can just make it if I can just make it another 10 years, right? If I can just climb Mount Everest, right? Stuff that it's a little bit of wishful thinking mixed with the denial. Depression. So here, and I have a graph a little bit later on in the slide, we have what's called the valley of despair. So if you think of somebody's self-esteem or their mood right now, when they hit depression, just as you would imagine in the diagnosis of depression, there's a big dip in their mood. That dip is called the valley of despair. And that's where this person is begrudgingly maybe starting to accept. And so this is where I'm dying, the reality has set in, but at the expense of everything around them. So I'm not going to try, I'm not going to enjoy anything. My relationships don't matter. So I'm disconnecting from everybody. I'm isolating. I may have begun my own internal mourning process. And again, this isn't wrong. This is a normal process. It would be normal. I would expect this person to pull away. I want time to myself. I need to think. I need to process. Not really diving in, right? So for me, I'm this will shock many of you. I am a gamer. And so, yeah, if I was in this state, God forbid something happened to a loved one of mine, if I hit this, I probably wouldn't really want to participate that much in gaming stuff. I'd be very upset. I wouldn't be looking up gaming stuff. I wouldn't really be involved with my work. I wouldn't be putting out the quality education that I usually put out, right? That's normal. Unhealthy would be the self-destructive stuff. I'm not taking care of myself now, right? I stop eating, I stop sleeping, I stop hygiene, I stop fulfilling really serious obligations, right? The removal of relationships, right? People stop calling because I'm never calling them back or never wanting to talk to them. I leave them on red. And then acceptance. This is happening, and it's not like acceptance doesn't mean you condone it, right? And that goes for any aspect or any situation where acceptance is there, like such as with acceptance and commitment therapy. Acceptance doesn't mean that you're condoning it. So this is not someone who's like, "Oh, I've got this and I'm perfectly fine with it." It's simply acknowledging in a non-destructive way that this is happening, right? It's stability. This is happening. I get it. It's not going to change. I'm not happy about it, obviously. And I'm also not in that depressed state anymore. So here's an overview. Again, just kind of recap. Denial. Moving away from the event, right? This is not happening. Anger, right? I think, just kind of based on my experience working with people, it's the idea of this thing is beyond my control. It's not fair. I don't want it and I can't get rid of it. Bargaining. Let me do this, right? Maybe it's wishful thinking. Depression. I've started to accept that this is going to happen. and I'm miserable about it. And again, understandably so. In acceptance, this is what's going to happen, and this is how I'm planning on moving forward. So here's the graph. So a couple things, right? The first thing is, you see right here, that dip with depression, that's what we refer to as the valley of despair. And this is where we really worry about people, right? It's difficult to get out of here because you're combating the situation plus the depressive symptoms. And then out of there, we come up to acceptance. The other thing is more contemporary models. Let's let me. Ooh, a laser pointer. Let's see what this is about. Oh, okay. So, anyway, more contemporary models have added 2 other stages. The first one is shock. That red circle you see there, that's all me. So, shock comes before denial. This is very, very brief, right? This is the what? Right? This is the initial reaction. I would expect numbness, surprise, just maybe a momentary disconnection where they're kind of checked out. That is shock. And then it goes into denial, right? What was said to me has set in, and now I'm kind of rejecting that. We go to anger, bargaining, depression. The other stage that has been suggested is testing, right? Or it might be called experimentation. I'm coming out, and now I'm sort of putting some ideas to practice. I'm kind of touching on different things. I want to see if I can do this. When I was in depression, right, it is a comfortable numbness. I think that's a Pink Floyd album, Comfortably Numb. I'm here. It's difficult for people to come out of here. We very quickly get comfortable in this place. And we start thinking, like, what's the point? Nothing matters. This isn't going to work. We start coming out a little bit and we start testing it. So I called, because someone down here might think, well, why am I going to call so-and-so? They're not going to want to talk to me. But then they start testing, right? Maybe with some counseling, and they send a text to so-and-so. And I see that so-and-so replies, oh, hey, look, they're reading my text. They're replying to me. They're not angry. They're not calling me a burden. I'm not weighing them down. Oh, they're saying that they're glad I reached out to them. Right? I'm kind of testing. I went outside. I went for some exercise, or I tried eating, and it did improve my mood. They were right. I did feel better after I did that. And then we start moving on into acceptance. So before we go further, a couple notes about this. One does not need to go through all of the stages. There are many people who they're in one, they skip some, they're in anger, and then they go straight to acceptance, right? They might be, this is unfair, I can't believe this, and then after some time they're just that, it is what it is, and this is what we're going to do, right? So one doesn't need to go through all the stages, nor does one need to go in order, right? I think it's even possible that some people will go in and they might go back, right? Just based on the situation and based on the individual, right? If it's a really complex situation, someone has a minor illness, it winds up being a major illness, then they kind of get better, then they don't, right? This back and forth, I would expect them to kind of go through these maybe multiple times, right? The amounts of time are not consistent, right? So this looks different for different people in different situations. What I'd want you to know as counselors is what those stages look like. We always want to move towards acceptance, right? But if you're working with a client and it just seems like they're saying a lot of stuff like, I just need to do this, I just need to do that, I would want for you to be able to identify this as bargaining, because the way that you would work with someone in this stage would be different than how you work with someone in the depression stage, right? So really it's more about understanding what those stages look like and how you can work with a person in a given stage. I would not make treatment plans saying, okay, my client's in anger, that means we've just got these two and then to acceptance, right? You meet them where they're at. You work with anger, because what if they go from anger straight to depression, or anger to acceptance, or anger and then they say, you know what, it's not that big a deal. I'm done being angry about it. I'm not going to worry about it. It's whatever, right? So it's really about identifying where's your client at in one of these stages, and that's where you would work with them. Okay, I'm going to switch gears just a little bit. I guess pause and take a break if you need one. So, mourning, right? So we really kind of think that there's these 4 tasks of mourning. This is Worden's model. The first task, and this is what you could build a treatment plan from this if you're working with grief and loss or a client who's going through it. The first task is to accept the reality of the loss, right? Moving away from denial. I would also include in there maybe accepting, or to at least stop denying how upset or how hurt they are, right? This is something that I saw quite a bit, where something would happen, something tragic, again, whether it was relational, a death, and it's like, yeah, my mom died, but I'm okay. There is the acceptance of the passing, but they're really not okay, right? It's okay to be upset about this. Some of you have heard my example of my client, who is a YouTuber. He had a death in the family, and for well over a year, he never denied that his mother had passed away. He never denied that he felt upset about it. What he was not accepting of was that this still bothered him. And it took a very long time before he got to a place of saying, I'm not done with this. I'm still very hurt. I'm still very sad. And you know, the not accepting comes from a lot of different places. This was a young guy. He's in college. He's an athlete. He's got all this pressure and a lot of messages, just from wherever, saying, you know, big boys don't cry. You should be over this. It's been 6 months. It's been a year. It's been a year and a half. Why is this still bothering you? And it's really that, you know, very early on, he was not going to process this, but accepting that, hey, this hurts. Like, this really sucks, and I'm struggling. Task 2 is to process all that, which for him, we then switched into this, right? How can we pay respect to mom? How can we honor her? How can we work on your feelings? What do you need? What can we do? What are you feeling? Is it anger? And his was really complex, and I really wish we had class, because I'd be much more comfortable going into more detail that way. But it was a very complex situation, and you know, he didn't really know all the different ways he felt. So that's part of the work. Adjusting to a world without the deceased, and that's difficult. In this case, this young guy, he was very, very close to his mother, and he was okay with his dad. Mom was kind of the glue that held the family together. So she was gone, and now we've just got these 2 guys kind of doing their own thing, trying to figure out what is their relationship without this, without middle mom, right? And so they had to do that. He didn't realize, I think, when he was struggling, whether it be with, you know, academics, athletics, relationships, just having a bad day, you know, he would often go to mom to feel better. He would go to her for, like, you know, milk and cookies, or mom would kind of hold him or motivate him, and very, very loving. But again, without that relationship with dad, where does he go now for that? Right? So learning to adjust to a world without the deceased. And it can look much more complex. Think of someone who maybe depends, I don't want to cheapen the emotional aspect of it, but really depends on their partner for finances and maintaining a home and helping with kids and whatever it might be. Learning to do that on your own or through a different way, I guess. And then finding a enduring connection with the deceased while embarking on a new life. So this is why I tell clients, I'll be interested to hear y'all's experience as you start working with people. The goal is not to get over something or to forget about someone, right? Or to let it go. It's to be able to live your life while also honoring and maintaining that memory and that connection. So in this guy's case, the idea is not get over your mom's death, right? You don't think about mom, you don't talk about mom. It's not even to avoid talking about it, right? It is to be to live the life that you want without letting go. And that is where a lot of clients struggle, because they think that, well, if I'm living my best life and I'm happy, it must be because I've let go of my loved one. And that's not the case. We don't want them to feel that way. The alternative, so if you're doing a confrontation, like kind of challenging them a little bit, well, what is it? What is the alternative? That you are never happy, only so you can remember them. Is that how that person would want you to be? That be miserable the rest of your life, by not forgetting me, right? And that's just that classic CBT black and white extreme thinking, when really there's a multitude of ways to honor the death of the loved one without feeling like you can't live your life, and without feeling like you're disrespecting their memory. So a little more in depth, acceptance. This also entails working through whichever of the stages they're in, right? In denial, anger, depression, bargaining. Did a pretty good job of summarizing that in the previous slide, huh? Number 2, processing those feelings. This is where you're working. This is counseling qua counseling, right? This is the way you kind of picture it. Giving the client the space to talk about it, not forcing them. And this can take some time. With my client, it took a very long time. I suspected he was not done grieving. I think one time I brought it up, and it was obvious he did not appreciate that, and that's okay. He got there on his own, which is, when I was a newer counselor, that's something I had to learn about the counseling process. Clients will get there when they're ready. We can't force that. This is also where we're using the skills and interventions, right? You're using the creative interventions. What are some ways you can honor that person? What are some ways you're taking care of yourself? What are some ways of processing your feelings? And also just being with your client, just that connection, so that they have a place. You never know if the client that comes in is the one that you're the only person that they confide in. So sometimes being there and saying nothing is what they need. Adjusting. This is difficult. I guess being candid, even when we are at our worst, we're at rock bottom, everything has fallen apart, the world is not always going to stop for us. And so I worked with college students, and you had this death or this loss of a relationship or whatever the case may be. Yeah, we can do some things to help out, but ultimately, you got to communicate with your instructors to let them know what you need. Your bills still need to get paid. You have to live your life. You have your responsibilities and your goals. And that is really difficult. So this is not something that I'm not at all suggesting like that first session they come in and they say I had a death in the family and you say how are you going to pay your bills. This is later on as you're working. They've processed. They already did the other two things, right? They've already accepted the death. They have processed their feelings and now it's okay, I gotta get back to it, right? So this is at the later end of your counseling relationship with them. You've already done, and they've already done quite a bit of work in connecting. I can't emphasize it enough. The goal is never to get over it, right? The goal is to live your life while also remembering and honoring that person. However that looks, it'll look different between cultures and between individuals. They might want to have a connection with the deceased. They want to honor and remember them. And everybody's going to be different. It's going to depend on that the client. It's going to depend on who the other person is, culture, and the biggest thing is the relationship between the two, between your client and the person who passed, right? If it's a really terse relationship, it'll look a lot different than if it's a more positive relationship. So let's pivot again. Let's look at children in grief, right? The way children grieve um, really depends on their developmental stage. And remember that with kids, I guess it would be everybody, but in this case, we're talking about kids. Um, their developmental stage isn't always going to line up with their chronological age. So you got to try and gauge where they're at. So think of your human development models. What's the relationship between the child and the deceased, and what were the circumstances of the death, right? Sudden versus there was some expectation of it versus, illness or something, an accident. Children do express their grief very differently than adults. So you'll have to kind of help tease out what is the meaning of their feeling and their thoughts. Kids, they can be very resilient. Part of that resilience shows up in their ability to kind of continue doing what they're doing, which is playing with other kids, playing with their toys, stuff like that. They can kind of compartmentalize. And, the benefit of that is they are resilient. On the other hand, we don't want them to feel like they don't have a place to talk. Um, Magical thinking is a big aspect of this, right? So there might be thinking that, well, mom is going to come back, dad's going to come back. Um, and so we need to kind of keep a pulse. We need to depend on the other caregivers, right, to tell us what are you seeing at home. So a little bit about the developmental stages, starting very early, 0 to 3. There's no concept of what death really is. Um, this in this case, it's going to be really difficult. They might not completely understand. It might be more in their very young, nascent minds. It might be that mom just went away. They just kind of disappeared. Getting a little bit older, going 3 to 6, um, this is very common that death is temporary or can be reversed, right? And this comes from cartoons. So I worked with a little boy once who his mom died and he was handling it just exceptionally well. And we were interviewing, and he had said, well, I'm not worried because my mom will come back. She's going to come back as a ghost or a skeleton. And what it was is he was picking this up from cartoons. Um, they can believe that because children are inherently egocentric, that just comes with being a child. Somehow they're at fault or involved with the death. And we can see some regression. They go back, right? So we see difficulty eating, sleeping, and with potty training, right? A little bit older, 6 to 9, they understand. Um, death, they get the concept of it, to stop living. Doesn't mean that they don't have a tremendous amount of wishful thinking, and maybe this is different, right? And then older, um, the complete understanding that death death is real, and it's final, and it's universal. I can't fix that. That doesn't mean that they won't act out and they can't benefit from counseling. It just means that cognitively they might have a better understanding of what has happened. So this, I think, is kind of interesting. Disenfranchised grief. So this is when someone is grieving, but they feel that they shouldn't be, right? They might feel like this is not anything I should be upset about. So a couple of them might be like, think of pets, right? Everybody has different opinions on pets. So society might devalue the loss, right? It's just a cat. What are you upset about, right? The loss is ambiguous. I would say it's just complex, right? Adopted children learning that their biological parents have died. A loved one that maybe there was an absent relationship with, like that this person's in your family, but you didn't really have a relationship. The circumstances, this happens quite a bit. My parent or my loved one died by suicide, or they overdosed, they were partying and they just had too much. What if they were in a drunk driving accident and they died, right? So there might be stigma around, I'm grieving this, but they did this really horrible thing. And society doesn't recognize the person's relationship, such as in the LGBTQ plus community, where there are individuals who are going to say, how could you love that person? You're the same sex, or you're, whichever configuration, that it somehow is invalid to have loved, and thus it is invalid to mourn your relationship with the deceased. So this disenfranchised grief shows up as them almost a perpetual state of either denial or suppression, right? So in the case of this bottom point with the LGBTQ plus individuals, it might be they're not denying their love and their grief for the one who passed away, but they're suppressing the feeling because I don't want any kind of lashback, right? I don't want a reaction from someone saying, um, this was an invalid relationship. I don't want to have to defend myself. I don't want my relationship minimized. So when it's disenfranchised, it makes it very difficult to heal. Social support is what's needed. So for each of these, right, we would expect there to be support groups. And this is all in addition to your counseling with the individual, right? Other people are saying, yeah, the loss of a pet can be really difficult, right? It can be heartbreaking. Communities for um, people who lose someone who there was a complex or ambiguous relationship, right? So there are other people who can say, I was there, I understand it, and your feelings are valid, and you're not alone. So let's wrap up. Grief and loss, very common issue. One of the most common issues that presents to counseling. Um, Often clients will feel that their options are to feel sad forever while remembering, or to be happy while forgetting, and that's just not true, right? That's where, whenever I've worked with grief and loss, that concept in some form or fashion has come up. Unfinished business comes up, right? So when you have a difficult relationship with the deceased, right? Maybe it was a parent who wasn't the most loving, or there was some on again, off again feelings in this relationship, things like that. How do we wrap up those loose ends, or how do we help them wrap up loose ends? Grief takes time and space. We don't ever want to rush, and they shouldn't be in a rush either, right? A lot of people come in and think, I got it's been a month, it's been 2 months, I should be over this by now. And it's like, well, you're okay with it when you're okay with it, right? There's not a There's not some magical timer that's telling us you should be done with this by now. And for you guys, you can absolutely help someone who's grieving, right? It's hard work. You're seeing someone quite possibly at their worst, right? They are devastated, they're angry, they're hurt, they've got all this stuff coming up. And so it can be overwhelming, but you can help them, and they want to be helped, right? They're coming to you saying, I don't want to feel this way and I don't know what to do. So you can absolutely help someone, and a lot of it is just giving them the space. And even though they don't literally need your permission, sometimes it's just really nice for them to know someone is giving them permission to feel the way that they do, because maybe they can't feel it at home for whatever the reason may be. All right, everyone, that's gonna do it for me. Um, you know, it can only go up from here, right? I'm gonna try and make some better videos. I'm gonna get like a green screen. Maybe I'll get Ken's 5 in here. Who knows? The day's young. So I hope each of you as well. I will be in quite a bit of contact with you guys regarding the rest of the semester, with the assignments, videos, modules, things like that. But please, if you have questions about the content, or those questions that you would normally ask in class, send me an email. I'd love to do something where it's like I get your questions and then I'm able to express them through this medium. But we'll work on it as we go. And then, regarding the NCE, what I'm going to do with my classes is I will put together an NCE study guide, and I'll post that up closer to the end of the semester. That way, we have this huge change in the middle of the semester. This way you have this little packet that can say, okay, well, here for the short term, here's what I need to work on. Here's what I need. Here's what I didn't understand, and here's a list of what I should understand, right? So, but I'm dedicated to trying to make this work for you guys. So let me know what you need. Please stay well. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones, and I will talk to you soon. I can't find the stop button. Alright, guys. Bye.